As tensions in the Middle East intensify following the widening conflict involving Israel, Hezbollah, and Iran, European leaders are increasingly warning that the region is approaching a dangerous tipping point. Israel has begun what it describes as limited ground operations inside southern Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah infrastructure along the border. The move has triggered alarm across Europe, where diplomats fear that a broader regional war could erupt and lead to humanitarian catastrophe, economic disruption, and mass displacement across the Mediterranean. Among the most outspoken critics has been Spain's foreign minister, José Manuel Albares, who currently serves as Spain's Minister of Foreign Affairs, European Union and Cooperation under Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez. Albares has repeatedly warned that a major Israeli ground offensive into Lebanese territory could dramatically worsen an already volatile situation. Speaking ahead of a meeting of European Union foreign ministers in Brussels, Albares painted a stark picture of the humanitarian crisis unfolding in Lebanon. The minister stressed that the scale of displacement and suffering already underway should serve as a warning against further escalation. He said almost 1 million displaced people, the risk of a ground invasion by Israel in a sovereign country, and that would be a huge mistake. The comment reflects growing concern within Europe that military escalation along Israel's northern border could draw in multiple actors and destabilize a region already strained by ongoing wars. The current crisis has deep roots in the expanding regional conflict triggered by strikes against Iran and subsequent retaliation across the Middle East. Hezbollah, the Iran-backed armed group based in Lebanon, has exchanged cross-border fire with Israel, prompting Israeli military operations aimed at pushing the group farther from the border. The Israeli military says its goal is to neutralize threats to Israeli communities in the north. Israeli officials argue that Hezbollah's rockets and armed presence near the border make such operations necessary for national security. An Israeli military spokesperson explained the objectives of the operation. He said the IDF has commenced a ground operation in Lebanon to neutralize threats and to safeguard the residents of the Galilee in the north. The spokesperson also indicated that many civilians who have evacuated from southern Lebanon will not be allowed to return until Israeli security concerns are addressed. He added hundreds of thousands of Shiite residents from southern Lebanon who have been evacuated or are currently evacuating from their homes in the south to Beirut will not be able to return to their residences south of the Litani River area until the security of the northern residents is fully insured. According to international observers and humanitarian agencies, the violence has already displaced large numbers of people in Lebanon and killed hundreds. Several countries across Europe have warned that a large-scale Israeli ground invasion could cause devastating humanitarian consequences. European governments fear the conflict could escalate further, creating a prolonged war along Israel's northern border and deepening instability throughout the region. Spain has emerged as one of the strongest European voices calling for restraint. Albares emphasized that the situation in Lebanon represents a profound moral and humanitarian challenge. He said right now in Lebanon, we have a situation that is a disgrace to humanity. The Spanish foreign minister also pointed to the role of the United Nations interim force in Lebanon, the peacekeeping mission stationed in southern Lebanon since 1978. Spain contributes thousands of troops to the force, making the country directly involved in efforts to maintain stability along the border. Albares warned that attacks on peacekeepers and violations of humanitarian law are further aggravating the crisis. He said, "We are experiencing attacks against the United Nations force, a peacekeeping mission that includes a substantial Spanish contingent." Spain has repeatedly called on all sides in the conflict, including Hezbollah, to halt military actions that endanger civilians. Albares has stressed that the Lebanese population itself is not responsible for the conflict, but is suffering the consequences of geopolitical tensions beyond its control. In Brussels, Albares used the moment to urge Europe to assert a more independent diplomatic voice in global affairs. He argued that the European Union must not simply follow the lead of other powers, but must actively push for dialogue and negotiation. He said Europe must awaken at this moment when our interests are at stake in many scenarios around the world. The foreign minister stressed that European citizens themselves face consequences from the conflict, including rising energy prices, economic uncertainty, and the possibility of large refugee flows. He said Europe must act decisively to defend both its interests and its values. He said Europe's voice right now must be an independent, sovereign voice, a voice that brings reason, diplomacy, dialogue, and negotiation where others seek war and confrontation. Many European policymakers fear that a prolonged Middle East conflict could send waves of refugees toward the continent, similar to the migration crisis that followed earlier wars in Syria and Iraq. Albares also warned that conflicts around the world are increasingly interconnected, with military technology, political alliances, and economic consequences crossing regional boundaries. He pointed out that weapons used in one conflict can quickly appear in another, while population displacement can ripple across continents. He said we currently have situations where wars are also connected. The minister noted that the ongoing war in Ukraine, tensions in the Middle East, and broader geopolitical rivalries are interacting in ways that make diplomacy more urgent than ever. He added that weakening sanctions pressure on Russia amid ongoing conflict would be a serious mistake. He said it is absolutely not the right time to relax the pressure on Russia. The Spanish foreign minister also warned that the spread of the wider Middle East war risks overshadowing the unresolved crisis in Gaza and the West Bank. According to Albares, humanitarian conditions in Gaza remain dire, with limited aid entering the territory and little clarity about the future political structure of the enclave. He said Gaza and the West Bank are being completely overlooked by the international community because the war in the Middle East is spreading everywhere. In the West Bank, he noted that tensions remain high amid ongoing settlement expansion and violence involving extremist settler groups. For Albares, the solution lies in renewed diplomatic efforts aimed at a long-term political settlement between Israelis and Palestinians. He said Europe must lead the way toward peaceful coexistence. He said a path that absolutely must lead to peaceful coexistence to guarantee our fundamental values. Spain's diplomatic stance on Lebanon is part of a broader foreign policy position opposing the widening regional war triggered by strikes on Iran earlier this year. The United States and Israel launched coordinated attacks against Iranian targets, dramatically escalating tensions across the region. The war has since spread through proxy conflicts involving groups aligned with Tehran. Spain's government, led by Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, has strongly criticized the strikes and argued that they violate international law. He said one must oppose a war initiated without authorization from the U.S. Congress, from the United Nations Security Council. He added that the operation lacked international legitimacy. He said one must oppose a war initiated without authorization from the U.S. Congress, from the United Nations Security Council, and, as I've said, one that violates international law. Sánchez emphasized that opposition to military intervention does not mean support for Iran's political system. He said one can be opposed to an odious regime and at the very same time be against an unjustified military intervention. Spain has therefore refused to allow U.S. aircraft involved in the campaign against Iran to operate from Spanish military bases. Flight tracking data showed multiple U.S. aircraft departing from bases in southern Spain after Madrid denied permission for their use in military operations. Spain hosts several military facilities jointly operated with the United States, including air bases that have historically supported NATO missions. However, the Spanish government made clear that those facilities cannot be used for operations that fall outside the scope of existing agreements or violate international law. Albares said Spanish bases are not being used for this operation, and they will not be used for anything not included in the agreement with the United States or for anything that is not in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations. Spain's defense ministry confirmed that aircraft linked to the operation were departing Spanish bases. Several aerial refueling tankers, including Boeing KC-135 aircraft, were reported flying from Spain toward Germany and other locations in Europe as part of the repositioning effort. Madrid's refusal to support the operation has drawn attention across Europe, highlighting divisions among Western allies over how to respond to the widening conflict. While Spain has taken a firm stance against participating in military operations against Iran, other European allies have adopted more nuanced positions. The United Kingdom initially hesitated to allow the use of its bases, but later authorized them for what Prime Minister Keir Starmer described as collective self-defense measures. At the same time, Britain has said it will not directly participate in strikes on Iran. Germany has also declined to join the military campaign, although Berlin has expressed support for the broader strategic goals of limiting Iranian influence in the region. German officials say the country lacks the military resources for direct involvement in the current conflict and has no plans to participate. European leaders have instead emphasized diplomacy and de-escalation as the preferred path forward. For Spain's government, the priority is preventing the Middle East crisis from spiraling into an uncontrollable regional war. Prime Minister Sánchez reiterated the country's position in a public statement. He said there is always room for a negotiated solution rather than allowing oneself to be swept away by the devastation of weapons as the only possible way out. The Spanish leader called on all parties involved in the conflict to return to diplomacy. He said, "I would like once again to call for an immediate de-escalation for full respect for international law." Sanchez also urged international actors to resume dialogue as quickly as possible. He said the urgency of resuming dialogue as soon as possible. Spain believes that Europe should play a central role in mediating peace and stabilizing the region. Behind Europe's diplomatic statements lies a deeper concern. The Middle East conflict could reshape global politics and economics. Energy markets have already shown volatility as tensions rise near key shipping routes. European leaders fear that any disruption to oil shipments or maritime trade could trigger significant price spikes. There is also concern that renewed war could trigger a large wave of refugees heading toward Europe, placing political pressure on governments already grappling with migration issues. For these reasons, European leaders see the current moment as critical. They believe the choices made now could determine whether the conflict expands into a wider regional war or whether diplomacy can still pull the region back from the brink. Spain, in particular, is positioning itself as a strong advocate for diplomacy, multilateralism, and international law. Whether those appeals will succeed remains uncertain. But as the conflict continues to expand across multiple fronts, Europe's warnings are becoming increasingly urgent.